Hi, I'm here on a beautiful Sunday at Asbury Park Beach, picking up with Thelonious Monk, his life and music. Do I believe that I'm difficult to understand? Give me an example. Name me a specific number. Some of my pieces have melodies that any idiot could learn. I have written a rhyme that is in the same key from beginning to end. A tone-deaf person could hum it. For the album Monk's Music, Riverside asked that I allow myself to be photographed in a monk's habit, standing in a pulpit holding a glass of whiskey. I refused. For one thing, monks don't stand in pulpits. Then they wanted to put me in tie and tails. I said no to that too, and instead offered to seat myself in a little hand wagon because I had actually done some composing sitting in my son's little hand wagon in the driveway. I'll tell you, I have no time to consider what I should think about other musicians. I am too busy getting my own thing together. When I was a kid, some youths from the neighborhood tried to get me to hate the whites for everything that had been done to the blacks. And for a while, I tried to do that. But every time I got to the point of hating them, a white person would come along who would put all my efforts back at the beginning. My music makes no socially critical comment on race, discrimination, poverty, or anything like that. I would have composed exactly the same, even if I weren't black. It should be noted, however, that when asked later about this statement, Monk denied that he ever uttered it. Besides performing at the 5 spot, Monk in 1957 entered the studio 5 times for Riverside, each time with different combinations of instruments and personnel, including Coleman Hawkins and baritone saxophonist Jerry Mulligan. Monk's Riverside recordings are generally accounted among the best. The septet to which Hawkins contributed made the first recording of Crepuscule with Nellie. This is a piece Monk wrote for his wife when she lay in the hospital seriously ill. He worked on it an entire month. When performing it in ensemble, he never permitted solos on the grounds that it would disrupt the dominant mood. The powerful media concern CBS also began to take note of Monk's artistic and commercial success. In December 1957, they invited him to appear on their famous television show, The Sound of Jazz. A tape of the program is available. This particular program included jazz greats Count Basie, Coleman Hawkins, Billie Holiday, and Lester Young. Modern jazz was represented by Monk's trio and the Jimmy Guthrie Three. During Monk's spot, Count Basie can be seen sitting on a bar stool in the bay of the piano, listening to his colleague with as much evident wonder as amusement. A smile of pride in his protege is discernible on the lips of Coleman Hawkins, standing a little further off. Legend has it that Monk was so excited during the days before his appearance that he had trouble sleeping. An LP was to be marketed along with the show, and a recording date was set some days prior. When it arrived, Monk finally fell asleep and missed the date. This is the reason given for why Mal Waldron represents the modern Monk School of Piano on the record. Waldron insists that the recording session took place after the production of the show. He confirms the rest of the story, though. On the scheduled date, there was no getting hold of Monk, and so Waldron finally made his first solo piano recording in Monk's place. Understandably, he was a little nervous, and his number is consequently entitled Nervous. In the quartet at the 5 spot, John Coltrane was replaced by Johnny Griffin, whom Monk had met in 1955 in Chicago, and with whom he had made recordings in 1957 with Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers. Coltrane returned to the Miles Davis Quintet, a more self-aware and well-regarded musician. Later in the year, Griffin's place was taken by Charlie Rouse, who would remain with Monk for 10 years. His playing was more reserved and nonchalant, than that of his predecessors. On September 11, 1958, Monk and Charlie Rouse drove with the Baroness to Baltimore for a date. In Delaware, they stopped before a hotel. Monk was thirsty and asked the manager at reception for a glass of water. The manager reacted hostilely, whereat Monk fell into a gloomy silence and began to pace the lobby. The manager found this giant stalking his hotel alarming and called the police. When they arrived, Monk was already sitting in his car. They ordered him out, but Monk just stared straight ahead and didn't move. He was forced out of the car and handcuffed. The car was then thoroughly searched. In the Baroness's luggage, they found some marijuana, which she declared to be hers. A charge against her would later be thrown out. Monk, however, would be found guilty of trespassing. For the New York police, it was grounds once again for depriving him of his cabaret card, this time for 2 years. Harry Colombi protested that the hotel manager had engaged in racist behavior. But because Monk wouldn't confirm that the manager had called him nigger, his appeal was denied. As when he lost his cabaret card for the first time, Monk had few opportunities to appear publicly in New York, and he was reluctant to play elsewhere. An episode in the autumn of 1959 did not help. It incidentally shows how, while his professional career was thriving, his psychological problems were getting worse. He was booked in Boston and arrived at his hotel very late. He proceeded to take a few turns in the lobby, staring at the walls. The hotel manager, when Monk finally asked him for his room, took him for a nut and refused to give it to him. Monk went to his engagement, played 2 numbers with his band, then called for a break. Around 11:30, he returned to the stage and played the same numbers again. He then sat for some time before the piano in silence. At this point, the band packed up and left. Finally, Monk himself departed. He took a taxi to the airport in hopes of catching a flight to New York, but the flights had all left. He roamed the airport grounds in silence until state police picked him up and took him to Grafton State Hospital in Worcester. He was held there for a week for psychiatric observation. At his home, meanwhile, no one knew where he was. The Boston police could give no information, and no one thought to ask the state police. A telegram from the hospital was never received. From then on, Monk rarely traveled alone. Usually Nellie accompanied him. When necessary, Harry Colombi or Colombi's brother would fill in as his escort. Monk would regularly deflect questions as to his eccentricity with the remark, "I can't be crazy. They had me in a nut house once and let me go." Again, as when he first lost his cabaret card, Thelonious and Nellie shielded the children from knowledge of his problems. Monk used his enforced free time, as his son would later report, to play piano from morning to night. To his family, he was anything but the silent, mysterious man he was perceived to be in public. In a 1993 interview, Nellie described him thus: Thelonious had continuous nonsense in his head, joking, teasing, napping. We had so much fun. Thelonious Jr. agrees with her. Thelonious was a true family guy. He was always in the mood for fun and loved to play with us kids. Card games, dice games, jazzy games, poker games. In spite of losing his cabaret card, Monk no longer had to contend for recognition. His albums were universally praised. His appearances were handled by Joe Glaser's powerful Associated Booking Association. The fee for the quartet for a single evening was $800 2 years earlier. Now it was $1,000. He was an overwhelming favorite at the Newport Festival. In July 1959, he recorded some numbers for Roger Vadim's film Les Liaisons Dangereuses. Now was also the time to take advantage of the interest in Monk and the rest of the world. particularly in the expanding European market. The quartet toured Europe annually from 1960 to 1967. They also made appearances in jazz-hungry Japan. For some time, Monk had been working with the third-string composer Hal Overton. Overton was taken with Monk's compositions and in collaboration with the pianist arranged them for a large band. In February 1959, the arrangements were performed with a 10-piece orchestra in New York's Town Hall. At Riverside, they had the foresight to record the event. The public and the majority of critics were enthusiastic about the resulting album, the Thelonious Monk Orchestra at Town Hall. In autumn of the same year, Monk traveled to appearances in California. The concert at the Hollywood Bowl struck many observers as chaotic. It appeared to revive the rumors of Monk's undependability. He started out playing an uncertain misterioso with the quartet, accompanying Charlie Rouse with elbow clusters. There followed a heated discussion about what to play next. Monk cut it short by playing the opening notes of Round Midnight. After this number, he abruptly left the stage and did not return. The owner of the Black Hawk Club in San Francisco had never hired Monk up to this point because of this very behavior. Nevertheless, he now wanted to share in the Monk boom, and before the Hollywood Bowl fiasco, he had already engaged him with a band of prominent local musicians. Naturally, he was anxious about whether things would go smoothly. On the first evening, Monk was the only musician to show up on time. Everything went well thereafter, and the engagement, which lasted several weeks, was a critical triumph that also drew large audiences. During his time in San Francisco, Monk recorded his second American solo album. Up to this point, Riverside had undertaken to produce albums that consistently presented Monk in new settings, and as far as possible with at least a few numbers. In his live appearances with the quartet, however, Monk confined himself for the most part to titles from the Blue Note and Prestige years. The pieces were also performed in a rather inflexible format: theme, saxophone solo, piano solo, usually a bass and drum solo, then recapitulation of the theme. The disciplined saxophone style of Charlie Rouse, which translated Monk's ideas perfectly into continuous lines, does not have the same attraction for the average listener as the style of a Sonny Rollins or Johnny Griffin. Monk's piano style, on the other hand, strikes most listeners as charmingly unique. But in the ritualized quartet context, its cryptic, laconic quality can be difficult to decipher and soon becomes monotonous. The excitement of a live performance could help offset this reaction, but the potential for monotony still had to be reckoned with when planning an album. Riverside was aware of this. In April of 1960, they first recorded the quartet live with the usual personnel, including Charlie Rouse. The same month, Monk was also recorded at the Black Hawk, only this time the trumpeter Joe Gordon and saxophonist Harold Lamb, both of whom lived on the West Coast, were added for the sake of variety. In February 1961, the Monk's apartment was the victim of fire. Fortunately, the Steinway escaped undamaged. In light of Monk's international success, the media company CBS, already doing good business with Miles Davis and Dave Brubeck, made him an offer. For all his eccentricity, Monk was a shrewd businessman and never sold himself short. He saw his chance and decided to make the move to this international concern whose records were issued under the Columbia imprint. At Riverside, they were naturally not pleased that the artist whom they had brought along for years was now taking the fruits of their labor elsewhere. But anyone who knows the volatile jazz business knows that one must capitalize on one's chances. Orrin Keepnews and Billy Grauer were reluctant to let the pianist go before he had fulfilled his contractual obligations. They asserted their claims in a brief to the Musicians' Labor Union. The union affirmed the rights of the small label. Yet how was one to induce a musician to do creative work when he no longer wished to work for you at all? At this point, luck came to Riverside's aid. In Europe as well as Japan, the concerts were often co-produced by radio stations that secured to themselves the recording privileges. Billy Grauer managed to obtain the rights for the concerts from the Olympia in Paris and the Teatro Lirica in Milan. With these recordings, Riverside had enough material for the albums Monk still owed them, and thus an elegant solution was found agreeable to all parties. Monk's obligations to Riverside actually ended with the first live recording they released, consisting of the regular quartet with Charlie Rouse. That they were produced by a company other than Riverside lends a symbolic note to the ending. Well, thank you for listening. Catch me in the next video. Please like and subscribe. May you find lasting happiness. Bye for now.